Trust has a peculiar scent. Like ozone before a storm, it lingers until the moment everything breaks. I caught that scent on my husband's collar 3 weeks ago, but it wasn't perfume that betrayed him. It was a string of numbers that made no sense until they did. I'm Valeria, and I've spent my entire life learning to read between the lines. When you grow up as the only daughter of a hotel magnate, you learn that everything has a price, even truth. Especially truth. Darling, you're working too hard again. Lucas's voice carried across our modern kitchen, smooth as aged whiskey. He stood there in his tailored suit, phone in hand, completely unaware I'd seen his screen. Someone has to. I kept my tone light, stirring my coffee with mechanical precision. The numbers danced in my mind, 7-figure transfers from our joint account to a shell company I'd never heard of. The Mitchell name isn't going to uphold itself. He laughed, that rich sound that once made me feel safe. Your father would be proud. Speaking of which, dinner tonight. With father. My spoon clinked against porcelain. That's unexpected. Margaret's idea, actually. My mother thinks it's time for a proper family discussion about the future. Lucas approached, placing his hands on my shoulders. I fought the urge to shrug them off. The future. I tasted the words like bitter medicine. How thoughtful of her. His fingers tightened slightly. You seem tense. Do I? I turned to face him, studying the man I'd married 3 years ago. Handsome, charismatic Lucas Bennett with his perfect smile and empty eyes. Must be all those late nights at the office. Tell me, how is the Morrison account? A flicker, there and gone. Proceeding as planned. Why? Curious. I smiled, remembering the text I'd seen. Morrison complete. Transfer pending. Father's been asking about our progress. Lucas checked his watch, a nervous tell he'd developed recently. I should go. Early meeting. Of course. I watched him gather his things, noting how he double-checked his phone was locked. Lucas? He paused at the door. Yes, I love you. The lie tasted like ash. Love you too, Val. He didn't look back as he left. I waited 10 minutes before making the call. Rachel? It's me. Remember that favor you owe me? I need access to the company's financial records. All of them. My friend's silence spoke volumes. And Rachel? Don't tell anyone about this. Especially not Lucas. Val? She hesitated. Are you sure? I stared at my reflection in the window, at the woman my mother warned me I might become. Absolutely. It's time I learned exactly what my husband's been doing with my family's money. The truth about trust is this. Once you start looking for cracks, you can't stop seeing them. Like that morning's pristine sunshine streaming through our penthouse windows, reality has a way of illuminating every shadow, every flaw, every carefully constructed lie. Tonight, I'll sit across from Lucas at my father's table, smile at his mother's barbed compliments, and pretend I don't know what I know. But tomorrow? Tomorrow, I start dismantling the beautiful life Lucas Bennett thought he'd stolen from me, piece by carefully crafted piece. Because if there's one thing my father taught me, it's that in business, as in life, timing is everything. And revenge, like trust, is best served cold. Father's dining room always felt more like a courtroom than a place for family gatherings. Tonight, the crystal chandelier cast accusatory shadows across the mahogany table while Margaret Bennett performed her usual routine of subtle warfare. The Singapore expansion is proceeding beautifully, Lucas announced, cutting into his perfectly cooked steak. We're projecting a 30% return by quarter's end. I watched my father's expression carefully. Interesting. I hadn't heard about Singapore. The silence stretched like a tripwire across the table. Lucas's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Oh! Father's voice carried that dangerous softness I remembered from childhood boardroom visits. Lucas assured me you were fully briefed on the initiative. Margaret swooped in, her pearl necklace catching the light. Thomas, surely you understand how busy our Valeria has been with her. What was it again, dear? That little tech project? Artificial intelligence integration for hotel security systems. I smiled, noting how Lucas's knuckles whitened around his wine glass. Actually, we've just secured a contract with the Ritz-Carlton Group. Global implementation. Father's eyebrows rose slightly, the closest he ever came to showing surprise. When were you planning to tell me about this? Today, actually. I took a deliberate sip of water. Though I'm equally curious about Singapore. Lucas, darling, remind me of the projected overhead costs. Margaret's carefully arranged features tightened. Business at the dinner table? Really, Valeria? Your mother would have dash. My mother would have asked the same question. The words came out sharper than intended. Wouldn't she, Father? Thomas Mitchell set down his cutlery with precision. She would have done more than ask. Lucas cleared his throat. The Singapore numbers are still being finalized. I'd be happy to walk you through them tomorrow at the office. No need. I pulled out my tablet, ignoring Margaret's disapproving click of tongue. I have the proposals right here. All 3 versions. 3. Father's voice had gone deadly quiet. Lucas's chair scraped back. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. Why? I met his gaze across the table. Aren't we all family here? Margaret's hand found her son's arm. Lucas, perhaps it's time we dash. The first proposal shows a 30% return, I continued, scrolling through documents. The second, submitted to our Asian partners, projects 45%. And the third? I looked up at my husband. The one you didn't think I'd find? That's interesting reading. Father stood slowly. Margaret, I believe it's time for you and Lucas to leave. Thomas, surely we can discuss this like civilized dash. Get out of my house. The words fell like hammer blows. After they left, Father poured 2 fingers of scotch and pushed the glass toward me. How long have you known? About the embezzlement? 3 weeks. I didn't touch the drink. About Lucas using my name to authorize transfers? 2 days. He nodded slowly. And you waited until now because? Because I needed to understand the scope. My voice remained steady. Because I wanted to see if he'd confess. Because I needed to know if you were involved. The last words hung between us like smoke. Father's laugh held no humor. You really think I'd dash? You pushed for this marriage. The accusation I'd held back for 3 years finally surfaced. Said he reminded you of yourself at that age. Said he'd be good for the company. I was wrong. He lifted his own glass, studied the amber liquid. Question is, what are you going to do about it? I stood, smoothing my dress. What mother should have done 20 years ago when she caught your first CFO stealing. Remember him? The one who conveniently disappeared before the audit. Father's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Be careful, Valeria. Some paths can't be undone. I learned from the best. I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Father? I'd start looking for a new vice president of operations. I hear there's about to be an opening. The drive home was quiet, my mind already mapping out tomorrow's battlefield. Lucas would be waiting, ready with explanations and excuses. Margaret would have coached him, armed him with the right words to appeal to my heart. Too bad for them both. My heart wasn't what they needed to worry about anymore. The financial records spread across my desk like a map of betrayal. Each spreadsheet, every transaction log told the same story. Lucas hadn't just been stealing. He'd been systematic, patient, building his scheme for years before we even married. My office door clicked open. I brought coffee, Rachel said, setting down 2 cups. And something else you need to see. I looked up from the monitor. Rachel's usual composed demeanor had cracked, showing something darker underneath. She slid a manila envelope across my desk. Where did you get this? It doesn't matter. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry, Val. I should have told you sooner. Inside were photos, Lucas at various restaurants, hotels, intimate settings. But it wasn't the locations that made my stomach turn. It was his companion, Catherine Morrison, CEO of our biggest competitor. The Morrison account. The pieces clicked into place. It wasn't just about money laundering, was it? Rachel's silence was answer enough. My phone buzzed. Lucas. Again. 37 missed calls since last night's dinner. I let it ring. He's in the lobby, Rachel said quietly. With Margaret. Perfect. I straightened my blazer, checked my reflection in the darkened monitor. Send them up. And Rachel? Whatever happens next, remember you never gave me these photos. She nodded, understanding the gift I was giving her, plausible deniability. 5 minutes later, Lucas burst through my door, Margaret close behind. The confidence in his stride faltered when he saw the documents on my screen. Val, sweetheart, let me explain. Explain what? I kept my voice light, professional. The offshore accounts? The doctored proposals? Or your creative interpretation of merger negotiations? Margaret stepped forward, all steel and society manners. Valeria, dear, you're obviously upset. Perhaps we should discuss this privately without all these. She gestured at the office beyond my glass walls, where employees pretended not to watch. Why? Afraid of witnesses. I stood, circling my desk. Or just worried about what else I might know. Lucas moved closer, reaching for my hand. I stepped back. Baby, please. Whatever you think you've found, there's an explanation. The Singapore deal is complicated. Like your relationship with Catherine Morrison? The color drained from his face. Margaret's carefully maintained expression cracked. I don't know what you're implying, she started, but Lucas cut her off. It's not what you think. Catherine and I We're planning to use Mitchell Enterprises' proprietary data to orchestrate a hostile takeover. I pulled up another document. After systematically weakening our market position through strategic failures that somehow always benefited Morrison Holdings. You can't prove any of that, Margaret snapped. I smiled. Actually, I can. Your son's not as clever with computers as he thinks. Or did you really believe deleting emails actually removes them from servers? Lucas slumped into a chair, his carefully constructed world crumbling. Val, please. We can work this out. Think about what this will do to both our families. Both our families? I laughed, the sound sharp enough to make him flinch. You mean think about what this will do to you? To your reputation? To your mother's social standing? If you do this, Margaret's voice dropped to a threatening whisper, you'll destroy everything. Including yourself. No. I pressed a button on my desk phone. Security team to the executive floor, please. Then I turned to Lucas, seeing him clearly for the first time. You already tried to destroy me. Now it's my turn. You wouldn't dare, Margaret hissed. Thomas would never Father's already seen the evidence. All of it. He's meeting with the board right now. I watched their faces as understanding dawned. Did you really think I'd confront you without making sure every base was covered? I am my father's daughter, after all. Security appeared in the doorway. Lucas stood, desperation replacing his usual charm. Val, wait. Goodbye, Lucas. I turned back to my computer, dismissing them both. My lawyers will be in touch about the divorce. Oh, and Margaret? Give Catherine my regards. I'm sure she'll be fascinated by the recording of this conversation. After they were escorted out, Rachel reappeared with fresh coffee. That was just the beginning. I pulled up another file, this one containing Margaret's personal financial records. Now we find out how deep this really goes. Because some betrayals run in families. And I was just getting started. The private investigator's office smelled of stale coffee and secrets. Eli Turner didn't look up from his computer as I entered, his weathered face illuminated by the screen's blue glow. You should sit down for this, he said. I remained standing. How bad? Worse than you thought. He turned his monitor. Margaret Bennett didn't just enable Lucas's schemes. She orchestrated them. The documents on screen showed a pattern stretching back 5 years before I'd even met Lucas. Shell companies, strategic investments, carefully planned introductions. She picked me, I said, the realization hitting like ice water. This whole thing was a long con. Eli's chair creaked as he leaned back. Your marriage wasn't just convenient. It was the goal. My phone buzzed. Rachel. I ignored it. Show me everything. Hours later, I sat in my parked car outside Father's estate, staring at the manila folder Eli had given me. Inside was proof that would destroy not just Lucas and Margaret, but potentially Mitchell Enterprises itself. The front door opened before I reached it. Father stood in his study doorway, crystal tumbler in hand. You look like your mother right now. She had that same expression when she discovered the truth about James Cooper. Your first CFO. I stepped inside. The one who disappeared. The one your mother made disappear. He sipped his scotch. Professionally speaking, of course. Is that why you pushed me toward Lucas? Hoping I'd follow her example. His laugh held no warmth. I pushed you toward Lucas because Margaret Bennett had evidence that could destroy everything I built. Evidence your mother helped create. The folder in my hands suddenly felt heavier. What kind of evidence? The kind that proves your mother didn't just catch James Cooper stealing. He set down his glass. She helped him, then eliminated him when he threatened to expose her. My legs felt weak. I sank into a leather chair. Why are you telling me this now? Because Margaret contacted me this morning. She's offering a deal. He studied my face. Lucas walks away clean, keeps his position, and the evidence about your mother stays buried. And if I refuse? Then the world learns that Mitchell Enterprises was built on fraud and murder. He poured another drink. Your choice, daughter. My phone buzzed again, Rachel. This time I answered. Val, thank God. Don't react to what I'm about to say. Margaret's there with you, isn't she? I kept my face neutral, looking through the study's doorway. Margaret Bennett stood in the foyer, her perfect smile as sharp as a blade. I found something in the old server backups, Rachel continued. About your mother. It's not what they think. Call me when you're alone. Understood. I hung up, meeting Margaret's gaze. Such a lovely home, she said, gliding into the study. Your mother had exquisite taste. Such a tragedy, her accident. My father's hand tightened on his glass. Funny thing about accidents, I said, standing. They're harder to arrange these days. Too many cameras. Too many digital footprints. Margaret's smile didn't waver. Are you threatening me, dear? No. I picked up my folder. I'm telling you that whatever evidence you think you have about my mother, it's worth nothing if you're not alive to use it. Father's sharp intake of breath was the only sound in the room. You really are your mother's daughter, Margaret said softly. No. I moved past her toward the door. I'm worse. Because unlike her, I don't need anyone to disappear. I just need them to wish they had. Outside, my phone lit up with Rachel's message. Found proof. Your mother was framed. Margaret and James Cooper worked together. Call me. I started my car, watching Margaret emerge from the house. She thought she was playing chess. But some games don't end with checkmate. They end with scorched earth. Rachel's apartment felt like neutral ground, the only safe space left in a city full of lies. She spread the recovered files across her dining table while Eli Turner examined each document with methodical precision. James Cooper didn't vanish, Rachel said, tapping a yellowed newspaper clipping. He was murdered 3 days after your mother confronted him. Police ruled it suicide. Convenient, I said, studying the autopsy report. Eli held up an old photograph. Not for Margaret Bennett. Look who's in the background. The image showed Cooper at a charity gala, but behind him, barely visible, stood a younger Margaret, her hand on his arm. The date stamp read 2 days before his death. She's been playing a longer game than we thought, Rachel said quietly. My phone lit up, Lucas calling again. This time I answered. Where are you? His voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. Mother's lawyers are here. They need your signature on Dash. On the documents transferring my shares to you? The silence confirmed it. Tell Margaret those papers burned the moment I found Cooper's real suicide note. What are you talking about? Ask your mother about October 15th, 1992. Ask her about the Cayman transfer. Ask her, Dash. The line went dead. Eli's expression darkened. Your phones are compromised. They're tracking you. Rachel moved to her laptop. The Mitchell Enterprises servers just went into lockdown. Someone's deleting files. Can you stop it? Already did. She smiled grimly. I backed everything up last week, including Margaret's private correspondence with Cooper before his death. My hands shook as I read the emails. She helped him steal from the company, then killed him when he threatened to expose her. And my mother was the perfect scapegoat, Eli finished. Margaret needed someone to take the fall. Your mother's death wasn't an accident either. The room spun. I gripped the table's edge. You're sure? He pulled out another file. Margaret Bennett's private bank records. A payment to a known hitman, 2 days before your mother's car crash. Val. Rachel's voice was urgent. Someone's here. Security cameras show Lucas and Margaret in the lobby. Back door? Eli was already moving. Covered. They brought company. I looked at the scattered evidence of decades of manipulation and murder. How long to get everything out? 2 minutes. Rachel's fingers flew over the keyboard. But you need to go now. Take the fire escape. Not without Dash. Trust me. She met my eyes. I've got this. Go. Eli guided me toward the window. Behind us, Rachel's door splintered under heavy impact. Val. Lucas's voice echoed through the apartment. Stop this before someone else gets hurt. I hesitated at the window. Rachel stood her ground, laptop in hand, facing the door. Go, she mouthed. The fire escape rattled under our feet as Eli and I descended. Above, I heard Margaret's controlled voice. Rachel, dear, don't make this difficult. Funny, Rachel replied. I was about to say the same thing. A crash, then silence. Move, Eli urged, pulling me toward his car. But Rachel has her own plan. Right now, we need to get this evidence to someone who can use it. As we drove away, my phone buzzed one last time. A text from Rachel. Got what we needed. Meeting you at the backup location. Your mother would be proud. I deleted the message, watching Margaret's carefully constructed world begin to crumble in my rearview mirror. She thought she'd written the ending to this story 20 years ago. But some stories refuse to end the way you plan. And some daughters refuse to let their mother's murders go unavenged. Where to? Eli asked, watching the road. I pulled out the one piece of evidence we hadn't shown Rachel, a key to a safety deposit box my mother had left me, with instructions to open it only if I ever discovered the truth about her death. The bank, I said. It's time to see what else my mother knew. Because in this game of generational revenge, the dead sometimes leave the most dangerous weapons behind. The safety deposit box held one item, a USB drive wrapped in a handwritten note. For when they come for you too. My mother's elegant script, written days before her accident. But now, standing in the Mitchell Enterprises conference room during the annual shareholder meeting, that drive felt like a live grenade in my pocket. Lucas stood at the podium, Margaret seated regally beside him, both radiating confidence as he detailed the company's expansion plans. And with the Morrison merger. Lucas paused, his eyes finding mine in the crowd. We're projecting unprecedented growth. I checked my phone. No messages from Rachel since her escape. No word from Eli since he went dark 3 hours ago. I was alone. Before we continue, Margaret rose gracefully. I'd like to address certain rumors about internal investigations. My son's wife, Valeria, has been experiencing some emotional difficulties lately. The room shifted, dozens of eyes turning toward me. My father, seated in the front row, didn't move. In fact, she continued, we have documentation showing concerning behavior patterns like murder. My voice cut through the murmurs. I stood, pulling out my laptop. Shall we discuss behavior patterns, Margaret? Starting with James Cooper? Lucas stepped forward. Val, don't play the video? I connected my laptop to the presentation system. Good idea. The screen flickered to life, showing security footage from 20 years ago. Margaret Bennett entering James Cooper's office late at night. The timestamp matched the date of his death. This is ridiculous, Margaret snapped, but her composure cracked when the audio began playing. Cooper's voice filled the room. I won't take the fall for you, Margaret. Either we both walk away clean or . The screen went black. Lucas stood by the power cord, face twisted with desperate rage. Security, remove her. Too late. I held up my phone. It's already streaming to every board member's device. Along with proof of the Morrison kickbacks, the offshore accounts, and my mother's murder. Margaret's elegant mask shattered. You stupid girl. You have no idea what you've done. Actually, a new voice called from the doorway. She does. Rachel walked in, followed by Eli and 2 federal agents. My father stood slowly, his expression unreadable. Thomas, Margaret's voice turned honeyed. Surely you won't let them . My wife. Father's voice shook. You killed my wife. She was going to ruin everything, Margaret hissed. Just like your daughter's trying to do now. Lucas lunged for me, but Eli moved faster, intercepting him. In the chaos, Margaret reached into her purse. Mom, don't. Lucas shouted. The gunshot echoed like thunder. I felt the bullet's heat pass my ear, shattering the window behind me. Before she could fire again, the federal agents tackled Margaret. You're just like your mother, she spat as they cuffed her. Too stubborn to know when to stay down. I touched my mother's USB drive. No, I'm worse. I learned from her mistakes. Lucas struggled against Eli's grip. Val, please. I didn't know about your mother. I swear, Dash. But you knew about everything else. I met his eyes one last time. Goodbye, Lucas. As they led the Bennetts away, Father approached me slowly. Your mother left me a letter. About what she'd discovered. About what Margaret was planning. He looked older, suddenly worn. I should have read it sooner. You didn't want to see it, I said quietly. No. He touched my shoulder briefly. But you did. You saw everything they tried to hide. Rachel joined us, her laptop open. The press is already running the story. Margaret's confession about Cooper is trending. I watched through the broken window as Margaret and Lucas were led to separate police cars, their carefully constructed empire crumbling around them. But victory felt hollow, tasting of ashes and old wounds. What now? Rachel asked softly. I pulled out my mother's note, reading those final words again. Now we find out what else they buried. Because this isn't over. Sometimes revenge doesn't end with justice. Sometimes it just reveals deeper, darker secrets waiting to be uncovered. And I was just getting started. The prison visiting room smelled of industrial cleaner and desperation. Margaret Bennett sat across from me, still elegant in her orange jumpsuit, her smile unchanged despite 3 months of incarceration. I wondered when you'd come, she said. I placed my mother's USB drive on the table between us. Tell me about the others. Others? Her eyebrows arched perfectly. The drive contained a list. 23 names. All accidents or suicides connected to Mitchell Enterprises. I leaned forward. My mother was number 22. Margaret's smile tightened. Impressive detective work. Did Thomas help you piece it together? Father doesn't know I'm here. I watched her eyes flick to the drive. But someone else does. Someone who's been waiting 20 years to finish what my mother started. James Cooper's daughter. Margaret's composure cracked slightly. Rachel Carter isn't just your friend, is she? The door opened. Rachel walked in, her heels clicking against concrete. Hello, Margaret. You look terrible. Margaret's laugh held no humor. So that's your play? Revenge for Daddy Dearest? No. Rachel sat beside me. Justice for all of them. The evidence is already with the FBI. Every murder, every cover-up, every cent you stole. You have nothing. I pulled out my phone, played a recording. Lucas's voice, broken and desperate, confessing everything from his jail cell. His deal with the prosecutors, his testimony against his mother, every sordid detail of their decades-long scheme. Your own son, Margaret whispered, fury replacing sophistication. You turned my own son against me. No, I said quietly. You did that yourself. Just like you destroyed every other family you touched. She lunged across the table, hands reaching for my throat. Guards rushed in, restraining her as she screamed accusations and threats. One last thing, Rachel called as they dragged Margaret away. Remember number 23 on that list? The name that wasn't filled in yet? Margaret froze. It was supposed to be me, I said. Wasn't it? After Lucas secured control of the company. You understand nothing. Margaret's voice turned ice cold. Everything I did was for family. For legacy. You're just like your mother. Too weak to do what's necessary. No. Rachel stood. She's stronger. She stopped you without becoming you. As we turned to leave, Margaret called out, The game isn't over, Valeria. There are still players you haven't met. I paused at the door. I know. That's why I leaked everything to the press an hour ago. Every document, every recording, every connection to every board member who helped you over the years. I met her eyes one last time. Your entire network is burning as we speak. For the first time, real fear crossed Margaret Bennett's face. Outside, Rachel touched my arm. You okay? No. I watched storm clouds gather over the prison. But I will be. What about you? 20 years is a long time to wait for justice. Worth it. She smiled sadly. Dad would be proud. Of both of us. My phone buzzed. A message from Eli. Board members talking. 3 more murders confirmed. How deep do you want to dig? I thought of my mother's final message, for when they come for you too. She'd known the price of truth would be steep. Known that justice sometimes requires sacrifice. You don't have to continue, Rachel said softly. We got them. It's over. But Margaret's words echoed. There are still players you haven't met. I typed back to Eli. Dig deeper. Find them all. Because some games don't end with one victory. Some wars require scorched earth to ensure peace. And I was my mother's daughter after all. Ready? Rachel asked. I pocketed my phone, feeling the weight of unfinished business. Let's go find the rest of them. Behind us, thunder rolled across the sky, nature's applause for acts of justice long delayed, but finally delivered. Or perhaps just a warning of storms yet to come. The Mitchell Enterprises boardroom felt different now. Sunlight streamed through windows that had witnessed decades of secrets, illuminating fresh paint and new faces. I stood at the head of the table, my mother's photo hanging behind me where Margaret's portrait once dominated. The last of the indictments came through this morning, Eli reported, sliding files across the polished wood. 7 board members, 3 executives, and 2 offshore bankers. All connected to Margaret's network. And the victims' families? I asked. Rachel checked her tablet. Compensation packages are being processed. The truth won't bring them back, but it gives them closure. I touched my mother's USB drive, now empty of secrets but heavy with meaning. What about Lucas? Accepted the plea deal. Eli's expression hardened. 20 years in exchange for testimony against the remaining conspirators. Father entered, looking older but somehow lighter. The Morrison merger is officially dead. Catherine's resignation just hit the news. Good. I studied the faces around me, Rachel, who'd waited 20 years to avenge her father, Eli, whose own sister had been one of Margaret's victims, my father, finally facing his role in enabling decades of corruption. The board's waiting, Rachel reminded me softly. I nodded, gathering my thoughts as the new board members filed in. My first meeting as CEO would set the tone for everything that followed. Before we begin, Father spoke from his seat. No longer at the head of the table, I want to address the past. No. I cut him off gently. The past has had enough airtime. Today we talk about the future. The meeting proceeded efficiently. New security protocols, transparent accounting procedures, ethical investment guidelines. The machinery of change grinding into motion. Afterward, Rachel lingered in my office. Found something interesting in the last batch of Margaret's files. She hesitated. There's evidence suggesting she wasn't working alone. Someone higher up, pulling strings across multiple companies. I know. I pulled out a single photograph I'd found in my mother's personal effects. Margaret at a private club, speaking with a shadowy figure whose influence I'd begun to trace through a web of global corporations. That's tomorrow's battle. Val? Rachel's concern was palpable. Maybe some secrets should stay buried. That's what they counted on. I locked the photo away. People being too afraid to dig deeper. And you're not afraid? I thought of Margaret's face in prison, of Lucas's desperate confession, of all the families destroyed by people who thought themselves untouchable. No. I smiled, feeling my mother's strength in my bones. I'm angry. And anger makes for better strategy than fear. A text from Eli lit up my phone. Found another connection. Goes higher than we thought. Ready when you are. Rachel read the message over my shoulder. You don't have to do this alone. I know. I gathered my coat, ready to leave the office that had seen so much darkness. That's why I'll succeed where my mother couldn't. She tried to fight them alone. And you. I have something better than revenge. I locked my office door. I have allies. Outside, The city stretched before us, its skyline a maze of corporate towers and hidden agendas. Somewhere in that concrete forest, someone thought themselves safe from justice. Someone who'd helped Margaret Bennett build her empire of corpses. "Ready?" Rachel asked, keys in hand. I thought of all the paths that led to this moment. My mother's sacrifice, Rachel's patience, my own journey from betrayed wife to something stronger. One last thing. I pulled out my mother's empty USB drive, dropping it into the trash. Some weapons outlive their usefulness. Some battles require new strategies. Let's go make some powerful people very, very nervous. Because revenge might end with justice, but justice doesn't always end with revenge. Sometimes it's just the beginning.